Ladies and gentlemen, after a grand product launch and the inaugural session of CDOT's 36th Foundation Day celebrations, I welcome you back to the next session. CDOT and European Telecommunications Standards Institute, ETSI, under the aegis of European Union-funded project on India-EU cooperation on ICT-related standardization, policy and legislation in association with Telecommunications Standards Development Society India, TSTSI, is organizing a two-day technical conference centered on the theme, The Future of Telecom Technologies, and 1M2M, the Global Standards for IoT M2M. The conference aims to offer deep insights into the myriads of niceties underlying the newly emerging dimensions of telecom arena amidst a galaxy of eminent speakers from around the world. May I request Mr. Praveen Mathur, Director CDOT, to formally welcome all the panelists of the session. Professor Paul Timmers, University of Rijeka and Oxford. We welcome you, sir. Ms. Pamela Kumar, Director General, Telecommunications Standards Development Society India, TSTSI. We extend a very warm and hearty welcome to you, ma'am. Mr. Roland Heckwartner, Chairman, 1M2M Technical Plenary. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Arindam Bhattacharya, Group Leader, Center for Development of Telematics, CDOT. Mr. Sushil Kumar, Deputy Director General, Telecommunications Engineering Center, TEC, Department of Telecommunications, Government of India. We once again extend a very warm and hearty welcome to all our distinguished guests and dignitaries. The first session of the conference addresses the critical need of technology standardization. We are privileged to have in the midst of us Professor Paul Timmers, who shall be chairing this session. Professor Timmers is a visiting research fellow at the University of Oxford, Department of Politics and International Relations for Digital Transformation and Cybersecurity Policy, visiting professor at Rijeka University, senior advisor to the European Policy Center, chief advisor to the European Institute of Technology and Health, and supervisory board member of the E-Governance Academy, Estonia. He was also the director at the European Commission for Digital Society, Trust and Cybersecurity, dealing with digital health and aging, e-government, smart cities, autonomous mobility, and smart energy, cybersecurity and digital privacy, including EU legislation, research, innovation, and deployment funding, and 2 European innovation partnerships. He held various academic positions, being frequently cited on e-business models. He was manager in a large ICT company and co-founded an ICT startup. He holds a PhD in physics from Nijmegen University, the Netherlands, an MBA from Warwick University, UK, was awarded an EU fellowship at UNC Chapel Hill, USA, and completed executive cybersecurity education at Harvard. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. May I request you to deliver your keynote talk on standardization to power our digital economies.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this introduction and the honor to chair this panel. And also, I would like to express my thanks. Let me move this out of the way, if that's possible. Let me express my thanks to CDOT, ETSI and TSDSI, with the support of the EU-India project and Indico, the International Digital Cooperation for making it possible for me to be here. And indeed, my talk is titled Standardization to Power Our Digital Economies. And the main messages that I want to give is that standardization brings enormous and very key benefits to our economies and to our future digital economies. But at the same time, there are also increased political expectations of what standardization and the standardization organizations, including one M2M, for example, will deliver. And there's a certain risk of fragmentation. And the way forward in this is to take a smart look at standardization and position standardization as strategic. So these are the points that I will make: the benefits of standardization, the changing political realities around standardization, and smart standardization to conclude with. So first of all, a little bit and just brief about the benefits of standardization, because in this audience, I'm sure you all know well about that, but it's good probably to remind it that in the three main domains that are sometimes used in order to analyze where standardization is applicable, so the domain of public goods, markets and infrastructure, and with public goods, I mean things like the public values that we stand for, the things that we find important, which can go from clean air and good health to the protection of privacy and freedom of speech. Markets, clearly the market economy, what's happening there, and infrastructure in a wide sense. So not only the physical infrastructures or the networks, for sure very important, I will say something about that, but also these kind of other infrastructures, like having a good ecosystem for entrepreneurship, take-up, transfer of technology and growing companies, as well as the societal infrastructure that is providing, for example, public services. And the benefits in these domains are different. What we try to deliver with standardization, that's the importance, the steering on standardization, is public goods and values, so promote and safeguard values for consumers in the market to have product comparison, more competition, lower prices, better quality, and for producers to have economies of scale, being able to reduce costs and improve quality and reduce uncertainty. All very well-known notions here. And the infrastructure is where really the words like interoperability have traditionally kicked in, because we are thinking of infrastructures as being able to be interconnected, even if possible globally, but certainly very wide across areas and regions. Interoperability, interconnection, interworking, but also interworking in the sense of being able to exchange knowledge, to speak the same language, so to say. We're just talking about it, that we're often using the language of English in the technical domain, but to speak the same languages and bridge that in some way or another also in our understanding. All well known, and the actors that playing a role in this, governments in their role of the representatives of the people, and the ones that need to make sure that the state institutions continue to function and deliver, in the market industry, research organizations, also the organizations like CDOTs of this world, consumers, and in the field of infrastructure, we are talking about public administrations playing a major role, but also companies that deliver and provide that type of infrastructure. And increasingly, across this, we see not only private arrangements and alliances, but also, as it is just suggested there, we see public-private alliances that play a role from the perspective of standardization. And standardization, more than once, cuts across, delivers at the level of infrastructure, delivers economic value, and delivers also to safeguard and protect certain types of values that we want to have. And that's not easy to combine all of that, and that's why these various parties should be, but are not always around the table. If you look at some of the studies that have been done into the benefits of standardization, just good to recall that. And I must say they are a bit old studies. These are studies that are running over the periods of the 60s, 70s, and until early 2000s. But that's perhaps also partially because it takes time for standardization to deliver, which is sometimes difficult to explain to politicians that may have a shorter time span. But it takes time, and then it delivers. If we look at GDP growth figures that are ranging here from 2.7 or 2.5 to 3.3% over the long run, then in the order of 7 to 27% of GDP growth is delivered by standardization, can be attributed to that. These are studies from, I think this is actually from a presentation by Etsy, and also based upon DIN and ISO figures. If we look, so summarizing that, the impact on GDP is that 7 to 27% of GDP growth comes from standardization alone. And that's just so super important. That's why you cannot ignore standardization. If you look at something more specific, like labor productivity, and of course that's only one input to the total economy, you also have capital investment, you have total factor productivity, which comes largely from innovation, but standardization alone, from a more recent study, interestingly, in the Nordic countries, so like Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, 39% of labor productivity is attributable to standardization. That's huge, that's enormous, that's really, in a certain sense, fantastic. But here too, you seeing the time scale of the study, it's like 35, 40 years long study, so you need to be pretty patient before you see the full effect of standardization being realized. At company level, there are plenty of examples, and there could be more examples. I think there could actually be more examples also from the domain of IoT. So I tried to find one. Here this is one of a German company, Nanotron, which has been merging with Sensera, which is a US company in the field of wireless sensors and IoT. And they did actually try to do, according to a systematic ISO methodology, allocate how much of their EBIT, so the earnings before interest and tax, is due to standardization, and that's for them 1/3, so very large for a company. Or take the example, somewhat older, of Fraunhofer Institute as a research institute, which created MP3, the audio standard, compression standard, which led to creating more than 10,000 jobs on that single technology only, and more than 300 million tax income for Germany in 2006, so not negligible. And probably the most important example that we can give in the field of infrastructure is GSM, which just within a period of 10 years managed to kind of conquer 95% of the world, 95% of all nations using GSM. And GSM you might really see as a combined industry policy initiative. So this is an example where you can say policy sparks global industrial success. Nevertheless, there are also downsides to standardization. We know about those, the complaints about the cost of compliance. You need to learn about standards, and standards are not only there for the economic effect, but also compliance to, for example, good health standards, safety standards, and that there is a cost to that. But perhaps the cost matters less when it's a level playing field. You can get, through standards, a lock-in into a specific approach, because even if standards try to be technology neutral, there are choices, and there's investment in that. There is a form of hysteresis involved in that. You make a choice, and it's hard to turn that back. I'll say a bit more about that later. Technical barriers to trade have been a serious complaint about standards, and it's actually been taken up in the World Trade Organization with specific measures. And the standardization machine in itself is pretty large, and it can become, to some extent, a silo. It can become a machine that is also there for its own continuity, and perhaps looks less at what is happening around it. And I think we need to recognize that that is one of the effects that you see in all kind of forms of governance. There is a certain silo risk in it. And finally, standardization, having been historically a business of developed economies, there's a complaint that standardization, with the investments that that brings, with the experience, the networks that you need to bring in, risks excluding developing and emerging economies. So let's also be realistic about the downsides of standardization. Let's be realistic looking at today about the changes in political reality. Standards actually get caught increasingly in political battlegrounds, in the new geopolitics. And the new geopolitics is a geopolitics in which we see increasing international tensions of various sorts, trade wars, accusations of cyber espionage, contested geographical areas. And we have to realize that that's a fact of life that is happening there, and it's influencing the work on standardization, even more so digital standardization, because digital is pervasive and it's really transformative. It's really disruptive. I think us who are in the digital domain have always said it, but perhaps not quite realized it, but you see how many sectors are changing, are merging, people are inventing business models that are spanning across sectors, newcomers are coming up. You see it already from the stock market listings. In the last 5 years, a whole change in the top of the stock market has happened, and these are all digital companies that are now in the top. And the pressure that this gives is a pressure on standards that leads to fears of erosion of sovereignty for governments and states, and fear of loss of strategic autonomy. And here I'm more in the political sciences area. So sovereignty has always been very important for countries to have their own identity and for nations. Strategic autonomy is in a certain sense the means that you have to realize your sovereignty, to safeguard that you can make the choices for the future yourself, for your own economy and society. But traditionally, strategic autonomy has only been used actually by two countries, by France and India. Interestingly, France mainly in the military defense domain, India because it's very closely related, let me not analyze that because you know that much more, but because it's very closely related to the leading role that India has as a leader of independent nations and the role that it has played in that internationally. So in a certain sense, also very closely related to the sovereignty idea. What is changing now in this pressure of international tensions and the digital disruption is that strategic autonomy has widened massively. It's no longer in that limited perspective. It's actually because people realize any facility that is underpinning my economy and society and democracy can actually be disrupted by digital and might also be undermined by digital. And having a certain grip on that is necessary because otherwise you don't have a grip on your own future. And so that's what strategic autonomy is about nowadays. It's about having the capabilities and the capacities to take decisions on your own future in the areas that you think matter, that matter for your sovereignty. And so it's much wider than defense and military, and it's much wider than a single positioning. It's actually today about three things. There are three approaches to strategic autonomy. You can cope, you can do risk management to keep your independence, you might say, to keep your strategic autonomy to a reasonable extent. You can engage in strategic partnerships, and you can promote the common global good. Apart from probably from two nations that might do everything on their own, that might be bowling alone, to speak with Putnam, China and the United States. But all the others don't have enough capacity and capabilities to do everything on their own. They will have to look into three approaches, which research actually shows is happening: risk management, strategic partnerships, and promoting the common global good. What do I mean? So if you say risk management, and you look, for example, at critical infrastructures, you try to do your best in order to ensure that these continue to function, and that you can continue to deliver, for example, health, transport, electricity in a reliable way. Even if digital is transforming this and you are dependent upon other suppliers from outside your country. Even if they are frequent targets for cyber attacks. You try to keep things going to the best way possible. And that's a quite sensible approach. And I would actually say standardization has a major role to play there, which I'll explain. In strategic partnerships, you try to work with like-minded countries and try to keep a grip to a sufficient extent on what you believe are, for example, critical technologies or critical resources like rare earth or critical facilities like energy provision. But you need to work with like-minded partners that have a similar kind of idea and on which you can develop and research and produce these critical assets together. Promoting the common global good, the third approach, is actually quite different. Think back of the early days of the internet. The open internet was actually there for everybody. It was intended to provide benefits to everybody on an equal basis, and everybody could equally participate, even if sometimes it has been perceived that it wasn't quite the case. The original intention was like that. Perhaps also to some extent naive, because they didn't build in security, they didn't build in privacy. But it is a common global good. And humanity has been also quite successful in promoting the common global good. Think of other areas, like the hole in the ozone layer. That is something where scientists, academia, industry, and governments very quickly got together in order to make a fix. And the fix actually works. That's an agreement internationally that we made in promoting a common global good. So how does this link to standardization? Let's start at that last side, the common global good. This would be, for example, protecting the core of the internet as a common global good, or perhaps even larger, be more ambitious. That would allow actually to say, what are the critical facilities that we think are global? And we all need to defend that globally. They cannot be acquired or controlled by a single country. And that allows countries to focus on where strategic autonomy really matters for themselves, perhaps more in military and defense, rather than in commonly used ICT technology. Open source, distributed approaches, like distributed ledger, are approaches that actually have already been showing to be quite successful there. It's a bit paradoxical, perhaps, for governments, because the common global good means that there is no single government that can control that, but it's to the benefit of all. And so governments, to some extent, have to relinquish a degree of their sovereignty, but in a situation in which they get back what they actually want, things that work for everybody. So standardization is obviously important. Take an Industry 4.0 approach, 4.0 approach, and what is especially necessary here is diplomatic leadership. If you do a risk management approach, there's actually a lot of common ground there for international types of standardization. For example, in quality assessment, reporting, risk management. And these are all areas in which we already have standards. And we could apply that internationally also in digital infrastructures like, say, health systems or transport systems. Why would countries engage in that? Well, because this is a way to promote your own standardization agenda and also to position your own industry, because you are there when you set the agenda and when you develop it. And so industry can deliver to a risk management agenda. And finally, strategic partnerships, so where you work together with like-minded. These are an integral part of the like-minded partnerships. You need to find values in common. And this could be in areas like IoT or security or AI ethics. Not everybody will think about that in the same way, or privacy protection. And so building these kind of partnerships between countries and regions is an important part of delivering your strategic autonomy. It can also be underpinned because governments are very closely involved. Of course, in this part, the strategic partnerships, is really also involving government to government, cannot be done by business alone. It can be underpinned by law and mutually recognized frameworks. So this actually shows that governance matters a lot. And I don't know if you remember the book in the year 2000 of Lawrence Lessig, a law professor at Harvard. He wrote a book called Code is Law. And what he essentially kind of said is the way the internet has been set up technically conditions what we lawyers can do. I would maintain that nowadays it's swinging in the other direction. Law, in a certain sense, is determining code. Law meaning the rules, regulations, and expectations that are coming from governments. And I only need to point you to the 5G discussion, where you see what an influence that has. So I think it's a reality. You can find it good or bad, but this is a reality. Values and sovereignty are moving center stage. Words like sovereignty, strategic autonomy are being used from Washington to Brussels to Moscow to Beijing across the world. And they have always been used, strategic autonomy here. But perhaps there's new thinking around it. So there's increased government control and laws, and we can actually, how do you do this? We can actually draw lessons from the more remote and the recent past. For example, settings that have an important degree of government involvement and are strategic is, for example, financial transactions, international financial transactions. And this is organized in SWIFT, a cooperation of banks. And this is where governments have found out with banks how they properly deal with safeguarding something politically sensitive as financial transactions. But we can also learn from current private collaborations, such as the 3GPP. I already mentioned the 5G issue. 3GPP is clearly under pressure. Read about it in the Financial Times, where they themselves have written a letter that they feel that 3GPP might get fragmented because of government pressure. So that's serious stuff, and you need to learn from that, also for collaborations that, like the ones that you are involved in. Anticipate changes in governance. The political reality is there, and anticipate rather than being imposed upon without you being part of the game, more government involvement, more pressure from other policy interests, such as trade policy, such as security in particular, but also privacy policies that are spreading across the world, and perhaps even policies like climate change. Finally, be aware that even more with these kind of government-imposed choices that we will see to some extent, there is a certain risk that you get law is code. that technological choices are, to a certain sense, imposed, and they cannot be easily turned back anymore. There is an investment of companies in these kind of approaches, so you get a hysteresis effect. And how do you deal with that? Because that's preparing for the future. So, preparing for the future. My final slide. Smart standardization is the way forward. It means you need to think strategic, and strategic involves not only technology and business, but also the thinking around values and governments. It has to be coherent with other policy measures that are being taken. Standardization is not a policy measure on its own, and it has to be integrated. It actually has to be mutually reinforced with other policies like investment policy, public procurement, innovation policy, and actually even trade policy. So that is my message. We are moving to something that is an opportunity, smart standardization, but there's also a certain risk in it, and we have to keep really the eye on the ball in the way strategic and smart standardization can develop. Thank you.
We wholeheartedly thank Professor Timmers for sharing with us his fascinating and thought-provoking views on this platform. We are also graced by the esteemed presence of Ms. Pamela Kumar, who is currently the Director General at Telecommunications Standards Development Society India, TSDSI, and Founder Chair and Vice President, Cloud Computing Innovation Council of India. An alumna of Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, Rutgers University, and Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, Ms. Pamela brings with her an experience of more than 30 years in the communications, computers, and semiconductor industry. Prior to TSDSI, she has worked with AT&T Bell Labs in the US and at CDOT in Bangalore. Later, she held leadership positions in Texas Instruments, IBM, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and other R&D labs in India. She was also instrumental in setting up the R&D centers of Network Programs and Alliance Semiconductors. She holds 3 patents granted by USPTO and has 5 patent applications pending in the networking accelerators domain. She is on the governing boards of Indian Financial Technology and Allied Services and University of Technology, Chandigarh. Ma'am, may I please request you to deliver your talk on standards and Indian perspective.
Thank you very much. Where's my presentation? So, is it here or the presentation? Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for the opportunity, and my greetings to all the members on the dais, Mr. Sushil Kumarji from DOT, and Paul Timmers, and Arindam Bhattacharya, and Roland Hart-Portner. Did I pronounce that properly? Okay. And special thanks to Vipin for having me over for the second presentation in this auditorium. Welcome to Luis Romero, who is our partner at HC, our esteemed friend, as well as a role model. So we in TSDSI aspire to have the similar impact as HC has had in the world of standards. So we are trying to follow on the footsteps of HC, but with an Indian perspective. And that's why I will share with you today why we need this Indian perspective. So when I was here on the World Telecom and Information Systems Day, let me also welcome all the CDOTians. And as I said, it's a real privilege. Having been a CDOTian myself, it's really an honor and privilege to me to come here and address all of you. And I really feel that I may be able to give you something which you will take back with you. So when I was here for the World Telecom and Information Systems Day, I had talked more about the 5G framework and 3GPP, whereas today I thought that let me focus more on the IoT M2M aspects, in which CDOT has been a key leader at TSDSI, and it is gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of significance at a national level. How do I change the? It's not working here. I go from here. Oh. Okay, now it will work. Okay. Something else I have to close? Okay. So basically, I'll talk about India's unique challenges in the IoT M2M space, and also the role that standardization can play. So I'll keep it simple. So we've all heard about the Indian Smart City Challenge, and this is just to reiterate that, right? The first announcement of the Indian Smart City Challenge, when India had had selected, the Ministry of Urban Development, as it was called then, had selected 100 cities and asked them to put in proposals for smart cities on what their approach will be to bring smarts into their city. And the first 20 cities which were selected to be funded to initiate based on the quality of their proposals. And at that time, while the Ministry of Urban Development was driving this challenge, the Department of Telecommunications and the Ministry of IT were looking at it. Within TSDSI, we had actually 9 reports on different verticals being developed, as well as TEC was looking at it under the leadership of Mr. Sushil Kumar. Then BIS has various working groups associated with the work in ISO IEC, specifically on smart infrastructure. So this was going on in terms of looking at how to pull this together from a technology and standardization perspective. Out of this thing, an analysis was done. So eventually all the 99 cities, I think the only one which did not submit a proposal was Jammu because of the political situation there. But all the other 99 cities did submit proposals, and we had a task force which we call the government, the Ministry of IT approached some of us to form a IoT for Smart Cities task force, in which we analyzed the proposals, and we found that the majority of the proposals, there was this concept of a pan city proposal, and then there were area based development. Area based development was to choose an area and try to make it smart within the city as a precursor or a role model for the rest of the city. But pan city was to pick one of the use cases and make it IoT enabled across the city. So the analysis of these proposals showed that what was high priority, what was most important, were things like water, energy, transport, waste management, and obviously the command and control centers. So this is what was important. And more than $30 billion is being going to be used up across these cities in the first round of its proposal, and it is touted to be a $1.5 trillion market. So you can see that, if you go to visit the website of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, as it is called now, there are a lot of initiatives that they are driving around this, and there's a lot of good material, and they're trying to harmonize things across the city, but across the various cities in their approach. But and they've actually approached DOT to define a standard for this. And we have been looking at 1M2M as a potential candidate to do standards, and also there is emphasis growing on the data part of it. So they're talking from smart cities to data smart cities, how to handle the open data there. Now there is this concept of the SPV, the special purpose vehicle. So in each city there is an SPV that has been created, and there is the CEO of the SPV who has been given the job of doing the execution on the smart city proposals. So when he is writing the RFPs or the tenders to invite vendors to participate, what's the dilemma that he faces? The first dilemma is this, that as he writes the technical specifications, at every level in the stack, at every layer in the stack, from connectivity to the applications layer, there are so many protocols, so many technical vying protocols. How does the SPV, who is typically an IAS officer from the administrative services, make sense and make the right choices which will be sustainable and will meet his long-term objectives? That's the big dilemma that he faces. Then he looks for standards. And when he looks for the standards landscape, this is what he sees. Under each vertical, there are so many SDOs which are touting for being the standard in that space and at every level. So obviously, he needs help, right? And he needs a trusted partner who understands technology, who can guide him, who can help him. And not only, you know, in a country like India, we need economies of scale. So that's why the Ministry of Urban Development is keen that we look at standards all across. So when we formed this IoT for Smart Cities task force, which was way back in 2016 at the time this challenge was launched, you know, we were in a conference, an IEEE IoT conference, and we, dignitary from the ministry approached us, and we announced right there that we're going to form this task force, sign up for it. We set up a Google form, and people signed up. We had more than 100 people from 40 different companies sign up. We deliberated on this for a few days, and this is what we came up with. What are the challenges that are being faced, right, as we are deploying IoT-based solutions across smart cities? The first is that the advancements in technology are rapid and disruptive, right? They're changing the way people think about the various verticals, the way they think about the traditional way of deploying technology, and it's changing very, very rapidly. That's the potential of IoT, M2M, AI, ML, and all those new technology as we're going up the stack. Then the second challenge is, I think I missed one of them. Sorry, the first one. The first one is that as we go to the vendors, they are the technology or solutions which have been developed for a different city. Something developed for Barcelona will not fit into Bangalore, right? Something developed for, I don't know, Delaware will not fit into Delhi, right? Or for something developed for Chicago will not fit into Kolkata, because they're just different cities. The ground realities are very different, right? But when we were going for those IoT conferences in the beginning, it was the mayors coming from those cities and saying that, hey, we have the smart city solution, why don't you take it? And very soon we realized that you cannot force fit these solutions. And as I said, technology advancement is very rapid and disruptive, and it's very important to have understand that as you are getting into deployment. Then the last mile in India, given the geographical diversity, given the demographic diversity, right here, I mean in Bangalore more so, even here, I mean we are here in CDOT, we all have smartphones, but outside there is a slum. The people in the slum are subscribing to the same vendor, the same service provider, and are probably consuming more data than we are consuming here, right? So but their requirements are different. Their priorities are different. So the diversity, deployment diversity is huge, the cultural diversity that we have. Okay, so all these need to be taken care of. Then the decision makers, which are the administrators and the city officials, they have very limited technical know-how, right? And they're basing their judgment on marketing spiel rather than an in-depth feeling of technology and how it moves, especially when it's moving rapidly. Then in the lack of standards, lack of a common framework creates a lot of disharmony, so to say. And what happens then is you end up with these vendor lock-in situations, and you get locked into restricted and closed solutions, which really leads to a rip and replace situation, not to an evolutionary, sustainable, that you build a platform, and the vision of the cities is they'll start with one thing, and then, it's a 10 plus year vision that you're really going to make it smart. You can't do it within a year or two. So you need sustainable solutions, but that's not the way this is going. And there are many examples of where, because of not having that knowledge of technology and not doing due diligence, so what's happening in the cities? Given the fact that the administrators do not have the technical know-how, they go and hire a consultant. And the consultant comes with again his limited view of which vendor is better than the others, and he tries to draft the requirements in a way that suit that particular vendor where he has knowledge. They are not getting a well thought through debated solution which standards usually provides. So there are examples of tenders which have been floated and had to be pulled back. I've listed two of them. Maybe I'll talk about the Bangalore Traffic and Meteorology Department. So the Bangalore Traffic Department, went and bought a fancy traffic management package, right, where they were, all the traffic data was coming in real time, and they were, trying to manage the traffic accordingly. The Meteorology Department was doing weather forecasting, rain forecasting. Now, Bangalore has this problem that when it rains in different places, and where it rains, there's a traffic jam and it becomes pretty bad, right? But where there's no rain, traffic is flowing much better. So the minister who had given money, or the municipal commissioner who had granted money to both these departments, brought the heads of these departments together and said, hey, can you do something, make these two software packages talk to each other and solve this problem that when there is rain in a particular area, the traffic can be diverted to the areas where there's no rain. And lo and behold, the two departments went back together and came back with a proposal which was almost as costly as buying the original package to make those two packages talk to each other. So that's what happens when you don't have standards. So this model with which the smart cities are happening today is a recipe for sure shot failure. And that's why we find that MOHUA is getting, some of the people who have been in the roles of the SPV are now coming into the ministry and saying, hey, we need standards, right? Because they see that all this money will be just piloting going down the drain. So now that moves me to the second part of the talk, which is what is the role of standardization? And as he reminds me, I just have a couple of minutes to go. So, in India, we realized, I think somewhere that it's important. I think a very big step was taken by the Ministry of Telecommunications to form a body like TSDSI, realizing how important it was for us to get out of the old mode of standards being defined within the government and creating an open forum where the government is as a peer along with all the other industry players to define standards. And that's when TSDSI was created. And if you see here, building research and innovation capability and building, creating global impact in standards, as well as driving global competitiveness in the adoption of new technology and enabling your markets and going to the next level in development, as well as the innovations in the country being taken out into the global marketplace. This is a three-pronged thing, and we need to work on all three of this. And this is what a platform that we have created. So GSC is the global collaboration of standards bodies, and by creating TSDSI, we have a seat on the table with all the global SDOs. And we are also partnering along with HC and others for 3GPP and 1M2M. So we have an equal say out there. So it's been a 5-year-long journey for TSDSI. And as you can see, it's been the early part was about putting the foundations in place, and only in the later 2-3 years have we started actually making contributions, and we have a list of standards now on our website which have the TSDSI numbering on them. There are some standards which we have, more in the networking space in which we have in 5G, related to 5G, which we have submitted at ITU, and the CIPRI front hall, which we have created in the networking space. And also 1M2M, which has a lot of contributions from CDOT, which we have proposed to be made into a national standard. So this again kind of highlights the fact that these are the contributions we've made at 1M2M, and we've been hosting the 1M2M plenaries. We already hosted this in 2017, and we are going to again host it in September of this year. So we realize that standards is not just about standardization, It's also about pre-standardization and post-standardization, and you need to address the entire life cycle if you want to seriously have impact through standardization. So here are some of the topics that are being discussed in our study groups. There's also another initiative that was incubated through TSDSI, which is called the 5G High Level Forum. It has a report that is out there, and specifically I want to highlight the various task forces. There's a whole initiative on application layer standards, participation in international standards, and use case labs which will feed into international standards. In the interest of time that Paul is telling me, I'll skip the details on these 3 task forces. I had a couple of slides to tell you what's happening in those. Our vision is that we really need to grow on the standardization vector, where there was this meeting in Chennai, the 3GPP plenary, where we found that almost 50% of the contributions that were discussed, 200 plus, were from China. So we say that, maybe somewhere in 5 years there'll be a plenary where we will have at least 20% which represent the population that we represent, the global population. So that's the goal we've set for ourselves. And finally, I just invite all of you to come and participate in the standardization activity. It's very exciting. It's about collaboration, and it's about consensus building, which is a different mindset and a different skill, but it's great fun, and it's, and you can say what you want, you can do what you want fearlessly and openly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing with us the diverse India-specific perspectives on technology standardization. It is indeed a privilege to have in the midst of us Mr. Roland Heckwartner, who is currently the chairman of the 1M2M Technical Plenary. Mr. Roland works in the Standardization and IPR Management Department of T-Mobile International, Austria, where he is responsible for standardization activities in the service domain. Mr. Roland joined the Department of Systems Engineering of Max Mobile that later came to be known as T-Mobile Austria as the project manager for mobile data solutions. Since 2005, he has been working as a delegate for Deutsche Telekom in several standardization organizations and served as a member of the board of directors of the Open Mobile Alliance, OMA. He joined 1M2M as a delegate in 2012. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. May I request you to share with us your profound knowledge on the 1M2M platform.
Okay, welcome. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation to CDOT. Congratulations to your 36th Foundation Day, which reminds me that 1M2M is now 7 years old, so it's so we have to do a lot to get your experience. And also big thanks to the European Indian project Indico. And what I want to discuss with you today is the partnership project. So the partnership aspect of communications, the collaboration aspect of standardization in principle and 1M2M in particular, and a high-level overview of what is the content. And we will hear in the next session some more details on what is the technical content of 1M2M. And with CDOT as such, we have a very, very busy and contributor to 1M2M, so there's much of a knowledge here. So when the decision was taken, or the initial discussions were up to do something different in the area of M2M communication and IoT communication, which is a communication of things, of machines, without being controlled by people immediately. There was some time of discussion what we should do. So one of the examples, and now I can be short since we heard a lot of the benefit of standards, and we also saw in the presentation or before the example of GSM. GSM as a horizontal standard in the connectivity communications, which enabled an IoT ecosystem, a standardized ecosystem, which speed up the product launches for all the people. So with that, you have lots of companies producing standard compliant. You can sell globally. This was in mind when discussing how to do the layer above, since if you have no people actually controlling the device, you might get into big troubles. What does a device do if the connectivity change? What does a device do if maybe it reattaches? How to deal with the application? We know of many issues that when meters were introduced in some country in Europe, when the application was simply waiting for the reachability of the server, when there was a server breakdown and they fired up the server again, all the meters all of a sudden started to send their data. It's not a big data for one, but it's big data for the network when all the meters sent all of a sudden. How to deal with such a problem, which at that time takes several days to rebuild your network and run it again properly. So if you think about the 40 billion or whatever, what the number of things that are connected is, you have to do something to get the control from an operator perspective, for sure, but also for the application provider, since it's not easy to track all the different failures that can happen. And this is what I described and what has been described before. IoT and M2M communication was not new at that time. It was very specific to certain areas. Vending machines, such things, very, very long lasting things that are there, and they have remote control, everything. But what the idea was to combine those data to get additional value add. And here comes the idea for one M2M in place, which is a kind of service layer on top of your given connectivity, which could be the wireless connectivity, it could be wired connectivity, whatever connectivity. And on top of that, you have such a service layer that controls and hides the complexity of the underlying network to the applications, so that you can easily communicate with simple APIs to such a service layer, and which eases and speed up the development of such applications. And as an additional value add, you can combine different vertical solutions, which, if it's a global interoperable standard, enables such a cross-vertical ecosystem. This was the idea and the goal, and in 2012, the 1M2M started. So the first technical plenary meeting was in September, and the foundation of the partnership was in July 24th. But what is this partnership? So you have to understand all these, you see here, standardization, regional standardization organization like ETSI, but also CCSA, TTA, RA, TTC, TIA, ATIS at that time. TSTSI came later, as we heard. TSTSI is 5 years old, so 2 years later, TSTSI joined. this partnership, but they brought in not only the idea and the to collaborate, but also brought in whatever they did until that time. So it was a good discussion. It was a long discussion to get the first common set agreed in 1M2M at that time, but it was since all these partners tried to get, or the members of these partners tried to get their things done. What at that time also happened was that there was collaboration with other industry forums like Broadband Forum, OMA, HGI, which also lead to a close collaboration and also definition of the standards that points to the device management specifications of Broadband Forum, of OMA, the lightweight M2M, and OMA device management. At the same time, some of the work of the Home Gateway Initiative was also transferred into 1M2M and is now also progressed there. So this is one major point I would like to mention, that it's collaboration. It's collaboration on a broad, on a global level. With this join of forces, it reduced fragmentation at that time. Another important point is this standards, due to their partners, become the URE standards within the regions. So for example, in Europe, it could become, so 1M2M specifications will be transposed as ETSI technical specifications, and finally can become European norms, which is one of the highest level of such a standard, which is also important for governments to rely on such documents. As always, standard is focusing on interoperability, which is important which gives the stability of your system, since it also reduces all these vendor lock-ins that might happen with very specific solutions. Even open source sometimes could become such a more proprietary solution in that aspect. If you think at lifecycle management, specifically in the IoT or in the industrial area, you want to have solutions there for 10, maybe 15, 20 years. If a company or a service provider, a vendor, doesn't make this time, you need to run the solution. So if it's a standardized solution, you can easily find, more or less easily find a backup in order to change. And for an application provider, you can rely on all these products. And on the other hand, what I also want to mention here is that the partnership project specifications are not only transposed by their partners, there's also the transposition of release 2 by ITUT study group 20, which is also referenced here. A quick look at the 1M2M structure. So it's not only a specification, there's also organization behind. This is the structure. You have a steering committee which mainly driven by the partners. So who becomes partner can drive the financial and marketing or the strategic direction of the 1M2M. And the member, those are the members of these partners that do the actual technical specification work. The technical plenary is then structured as it's depicted here. There's one group that's dedicated for requirements and data modeling, which is what comes into the organization from outside. The SDS group, so the is dedicated to developing the specifications. And then there's the testing and developer ecosystem group, which is delivering the test specifications. It's collaborating with the certification and also reach out to the developer and provides developer information. At the end, you have what initially was the goal. It's the same picture as before, but now slightly more technically. So the 1M2M service layer is in between the connectivity network. You see here some examples of different technologies that 1M2M can run upon. And on top of it are dedicated applications for specific use. The benefit is that you can exchange data coming from below this service layer, within the service layer, so that different applications can use, based on access control policy and all the security and privacy capabilities. Some more minutes. I will drive you to go quickly across this slide. This slide is a very dense slide, so you see high-level services that are defined in 1M2M and that can be reused when you have implemented that. It's registration of application entities towards a server. It's you can run this architecture on, you have devices, sensors, you might have gateways, and you have the infrastructure or cloud. And with that, you can register each other. You have discovery operations, subscription notification, data management repository, communication management, a very important thing, as I described at the very beginning, in order to know what to do with the data and when to transfer data based on some policies. Device management is a very important and the initial service that you anyhow need for all of the remote management of devices. Application and service management, network service exposure, we will hear about that in the next session. Semantics, a very important part, so you have semantic annotation with all your data that you can later on in your application know what is this data all about, and with that the data is clean, sufficiently clean to use it also in any other big data application. 2 more minutes. One aspect, it's the interworking. At the core of 1M2M is also defined interworking to existing other technologies. For instance, we heard about Industry 4.0, so OPC UA or OCF and ZigBee. I will not cover that. We might hear that later. I will only come to one, and I guess this is the final slide. If you get the slide set, it has much more, it contains much more information. It has also many links to public accessible sites where you can find much more details on that. But I would like to end here with this timeline, where you see the 7 years. The red dots are the releases, when releases have been approved. You see the interoperability, these blue dots, which are testing events where implementations have been tested against each other. You see the green part, which are hackathons that were events in Europe, US, India, China, South Korea. You see the gray dots, which is underneath this line. These are industry days, which are kind of one-day show and workshop in some regions to get to know 1M2M and to get also companies in that present their approach to IoT, which is again back to the collaboration community to enrich also what we have. And the orange, the lower part is these are the certification, some certification milestones since at the beginning of this year. GCF is the certification body for the 1M2M specifications. And the last information, we had it in the last presentation, I thought I do it also here. Next month we have the Industry Day in Hyderabad at our next technical plenary meeting. And with this, I'd like to close this presentation. You see much more information in the slide set. You will get much more information in the later talks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing with us your profound insights into the One M2M Partnership Project. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now have a video talk by Dr. Shane Hay. Dr. Shane is a standardization professional specialist at Nokia. She is concentrating on IoT standardization and vertical industries. Her interests include 5G, IoT M2M architecture, lightweight protocols, information models and applications, as well as verticals like industrial IoT, smart cities, and automotive. She participates in several M2M IoT industry standards bodies, including ITUT, 1M2M, and ETSI. She is also serving in the role of chair of the Requirements and Domain Models Working Group of the 1M2M. We thank Dr. Shane for connecting with us in this conference. She will be delivering her video talk on standardization of IoT ecosystem and 1M2M. We'll just try to connect with her.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shen He from Nokia Bell Labs. Today is my honor to be invited to this event. I believe you already received a comprehensive introduction from our colleagues by previous excellent presentations about 1M2M. So in this session, I would like to introduce the latest progress about international collaboration between 1M2M and ITUT, especially about ITUT Y.4500 series. So ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies. The motivation for ITUT Study Group 20 is to lead the study of developing recommendations, reports, handbooks, guidelines about IoT and smart cities and communities. The target is to collect requirements use cases from closed and unconnected vertical silos or functionality between different service providers and try to figure out the common part in order to provide standardization to provide innovative and collaborative new models that connect these vertical silos. And Study Group 20 is the leading study group to address Internet of Things and its applications, smart cities and communities, including e-services and smart services, as well as IoT identifications. This slide shows the ITUT Study Group 20 structure. So in this study period, there are 7 questions under the umbrella of 2 working parties in Study Group 20. Question 1 is about end-to-end connectivities, interoperability, big data aspects. Question 2 is about requirement, capabilities, and use cases across verticals. Question 3 addresses study about IoT and smart city architectures, management, verticals, and QoS. Question 4 mainly focusing on e-services, applications, platforms. In Working Party 2, question 5 is the leading question to study terminologies and definitions. Question 6 address studies about security, privacy, trust, identification for IoT and smart cities. Question 7 is focusing on evaluation and assessment of smart cities and communities. Besides of that, we also have 4 regional groups. And other group under Study Group 20, including the JCA IoT and the focus group on data processing and management. Currently, Study Group 20 is working on many hot topics in IoT and smart cities. In IoT area, it includes such as drones or UAV for IoT, edge computing, artificial intelligence, smart manufacturing, blockchain, and IoT for developing countries, ITS based on IoT technologies, privacy and trust for IoT systems, as well as interoperability. In the perspective of smart cities and communities, we study open data in smart cities, use cases requirement, smart services, disaster, as well as other smart city related services, and smart city infrastructure. So in the focus group, especially, it delivered the study about data structure and data transfer protocol, and function description and metadata for smart city and community, as well as data integrity. So with the leading role about IoT and smart cities, in ITUT, Study Group 20 is doing good on strengthening regional and international collaborations. We have 4 regional groups, so as well as the GCA IoT and Smart City and Community meetings. The good example to collaborate with the international SDOs, including the collaboration with 1M2M, ISO, and IEC. So today, with this chance, I would like to introduce the progress about the collaboration between ITOT Study Group 20 and 1M2M. So this is the basic introduction about 1M1. I believe you already captured the introduction from previous presentations, so I would skip this one. So this is the collaboration mechanism between 1M2M and ITOT Study Group 20. The collaboration between 1M2M and ITOT Study Group 20 was initiated in July 2015, which is from last study period. And after the collaboration initiated, we create a good collaboration between liaison statements. So many liaison statements sent out by 1M2M to ITOT Study Group 20, as well as Study Group 20 to 1M2M. And Study Group 20 also nominated liaison rapporteurs to help the collaborations between both organizations. And 1M2M also invited to give presentations at ITOT Study Group 20 meeting. So a very good meeting, colloquial meeting, was hosted by ITOT Study Group 20 in January 2019. At that meeting, a joint session was hosted successfully between 1M2M experts as well as ITOT Study Group 20 experts. So with those successful collaboration mechanism, so in this study period, we are doing good to produce this ITOT Y.4500 series, which is the transportation from 1M2M technical specifications into ITOT recommendations, as well as 1M2M technical report into ITOT technical reports. The benefit from a benefit for this collaboration is obvious because membership from both organizations have been calling for convergence of IoT standards and alignment of work. And the work done in both organizations is complementary. And one of the ITOT strategic objectives is cooperation and collaboration. And 1M2M also working on the 1M2M global standard for IoT and M2M. So the motivation from both sides is aligned. And based on this collaboration, the industry members and member states from both organizations, they can benefit from converged and aligned standards. So by the end of 2019, 17 1M2M specifications are approved as ITOT recommendations, which is the Y.4500 series, and 6 1M2M technical reports approved as ITOT technical reports. So currently, discussion is going on for next step collaboration. So this slide shows the details about this good achievement. So basically, more than 90% of technical specifications of 1M2M release 2 are approved as ITOT recommendations, which including 1M2M function architecture, core protocol requirements, base ontology, terminology, and protocol binding, including MQTT, CoAP, HTTP, WebSocket, as well as home appliances information model and mapping, and OMA management enablement and BBF management enablement. At the same time, 6 technical reports agreed as ITOT technical reports, including the industry domain enablement, use cases collection, and a group of developer guidance. So this is the good result for this collaboration. You can check details from ITOT website. So I would like to highlight the concept or the motivation for this international standardization collaborations, because nowadays there are many ICDOs or many alliances focusing on different topics in IoT world as well as M2M. So for application or for service level, maybe standardization is difficult to realize as well as verticals, but from a platform and interoperability perspective, we believe standardization is still necessary to realize the big scenarios such as smart cities and communities. So the wish of the standardization people is to break silos, not to create a new one. So this is our target, and this is our motivation to contribute to this collaboration between both sides. So basically, this is my presentation. Thank you for listening. If you have any question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
We thank Dr. Shane for connecting with us and sharing her insightful views on standardization of IoT ecosystems. Our next speaker is from CDOT. Mr. Arindam Bhattacharya has a vast experience in varied fields of computing and communications. Prior to joining CDOT, he worked with Electronics Corporation of India Limited with the mainframe unit and also handled the design, testing, and deployment aspects of strategic communication systems for the defense sector. At CDOT, he acted as the solution architect for various projects, including the mission-critical projects of immense national and strategic importance. As one of the IPv6 consultants impaneled by the Department of Telecommunications, he has been instrumental in bringing out the IPv6 roadmap documents. Currently, he is leading the activities of IoT and M2M communications in CDOT, which involves coordinating the activities of development of CCSP, the 1M2M standards compliant Common Services Platform of CDOT. He has also been a key member of the group in DOT, formulating the policy document on M2M communication. Sir, may I request you to deliver your talk on why 1M2M is essential for India.
So it was on that folder itself. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. So at the outset, I must express my gratitude to all the speakers on the dais and off the dais, and also those who have joined and remotely to accept our invitation to be part of our celebration for our Foundation Day, 36th Foundation Day. With that, let me move. I have a paucity of time, and Professor Paul is keeping the time, so he told me at the outset that be brief. I'll try to be as short as possible without losing content. So my first slide, so let's begin with some data, some kind of forecast. So this is a market research agency, Growth Enabler, the report. It was published in 2017, and it stated that the global market share for IoT applications, and if you see, the maximum is, without doubt, the smart cities. So 26%, followed by industrial IoT 24%, and then by 20% for connected health. Now this is a global scenario. So it might not be the same for each geography, each country, but this is what it is. And what we are targeting and what the estimates are that by 2020, this market is going to grow by $457 billion. Let's see something else. Now, just see something which is relevant for our geographies. Now, this is a Vahan website talking about transport, the registered vehicles. Now, it might not be very much visible to you, but look at the very top left corner. This is a number of vehicles, passenger vehicles registered in 1 year, 2018. So what does this figure say? This is 21.6 million passenger vehicles in 1 year. Hold your breath. Let me move to the next slide. For Delhi, if I talk, now in the same year, Delhi registered 729,000 vehicles in 1 year. These figures are only incremental figures. Why I'm stating that? Because I'm just giving what impact it is going to make when you are talking about a country like India. Now see the next slide. Might not be very much visible, but if you see, this is the entire Europe covered. I didn't have the figure for 2018, but I had the figure of 2017. And what it talks about, 18.6 million, all combined in 2017. You see the difference, the impact that India is going to make over that? If you are talking about IoT, if you are talking about smart cities, if you are talking about only one sector, which is transportation sector, look at the magnitude which we are talking about. The magnitude, our country puts up a figure which is much bigger than the entire Europe together. So the solutions, if they are not standardized, if they impact the countries in Europe to some extent, it impacts India that many-fold. Now what is it IoT today looks like? It looks like something like this, very verticalized, very siloed. So whenever somebody looked for an IoT solution, somebody was there with a solution. They put up some sensors because that is what people understood IoT to be. Put up some sensors, use some gateway kind of a device, set up an application in the cloud or in some private infrastructure, and bingo, you are there. So the value proposition that was necessary, was not fully realized by this kind of implementation. People were satisfied as long as the sensors were making some kind of data point which made some value to them. But was it the real value of IoT? Now when we talk about smart cities, it is actually an accumulation of so many different applications. Now all of them were siloed. So it was really an amalgamation of so many siloed applications put together. And as a result, what happened, the smart cities that happened in our country, the 100 smart cities we have been talking about with a lot of fanfare, actually resulted in very siloed, vendor locked in solutions. And as a result, what happens, despite having so many startups, India is called a startups country, but so many startups could not find their foothold into all these smart cities, because these were all taken up by the big players who had solutions under their umbrella. So it was very, very siloed platforms which were actually delivering IoT solutions. So was it the real value that we were looking for? Was it something that India was really contributing towards it? Perhaps not. So what are the challenges? What are the issues that have been plaguing us? The number one and the most potent one is security, or the lack of it. You know what kind of device is going to be put up in a smart city. You really don't know, because anonymity is not security. Currently it is anonymity. So authentication, communication security, data integrity, data privacy, because security and privacy go hand in hand. Lawful interception, these were not realized, not thought about in these kind of implementations. So thereby, no interoperability. You set up something in one particular city with a set of devices, new set of devices would not be working with that. And same applied to the applications. The applications also would not interoperate. No sharing of data. I'll come to this. Sharing of data, I'll explain in a bit detail. Device ownership. Who owns a device? Who owns, you put up a SIM, you know that, okay, this SIM belongs to so-and-so. But once you are talking about M2M devices and the device might not be communicating using a SIM, who owns that particular device? Who communicated? There was no ownership at that point in time. Spectrum availability, addressability, we kind of addressed NTEC to some extent by defining the 13-digit numbering scheme. But there's far more to it than what it is. Now, power supply, long battery life, energy harvesting, software complexity, these are a few more things which are really plaguing the IoT ecosystem. I'll give you an example. This I have been giving, but people might like to hear it. I take only one sector, say transportation sector. You all know that these days the cars are coming fitted with sensors. Now, when car comes fitted with sensors, in the initial days, it was only the premier cars, the Mercedes, BMWs of the world. They used to make use of these sensors to get data from these cars in their geographies. So cars sold in India also was transmitting data back to Germany so that they can then modify their manufacturing process so that they can design better cars for India. So that is one of the end user who can make benefit out of the sensors which are put in there. But is he the only one who is going to be benefited? Your car gets serviced by a service provider locally here. BMW as a company or the factory doesn't provide you services. So what if he gets a portion of that particular data so that he can plan for the logistics or the inventory which actually is required to service your car? The insurance company, if he happens to know how you're driving your car, may give you far better benefits, far lesser premium because you are a safe driver. And the fraudulent cases of insurance claims can be brought down to a minimal. The on-road assistance guys, needless to say, there are plenty. The traffic policeman, if he happens to know the car has broken down somewhere, can then redirect the traffic from other routes. The information could be useful to the commuters also, who now on this date rely more on the Google Maps or the Google Traffics, right? So this is just one example, but think about these proprietary solutions, how this can be achieved using the proprietary solutions. So if I take only these solutions being the siloed applications, in order to share the data amongst these, what you need to do is create a layer on top of it. And an application. So thereby you say that, okay, we are sharing this data. But think about it, that all of them would have to then plug into this management layer. It is easier said than done. It doesn't happen that way. So what is the solution? The solution that is available to us is in the form of a standardized common service layer, and that is 1M2M. So what 1M2M does, it breaks down the silos. it says that, okay, we are not going to redefine the entire ecosystem. We are not going to define new protocols, new technologies. But what we are going to do is going to stitch them up by a method of communication so that all of them, all the standards in the local domain prevailing, they can talk to each other and have a horizontal framework. So create a service layer where all the existing applications can be hooked onto and they can talk to each other, share data, authenticate in a regulated fashion. So if I take the example of smart cities, how it happens. So you have connected cars, smart homes, smart agriculture, so many other data sources in a smart city. So it stitches them horizontally together. And how it does it? You see, the same set of applications, how it now offers sharing of data. The communication networks, everyone will be having their own. So the communication technologies and protocols, the communication devices and hardware. So in order to share the data, the common service layer, now takes the place of the management software, which was at the top, required at the top now, because every application is now communicating in a very standardized fashion using the standard interfaces. So this standard common service layer would then be providing you the feed for the data sharing. So an application built around this common service layer now can share the data in a very authorized and authenticated manner. So you give authorization as to who is going to share the data, right? Now, this slide I think Pamela had presented in a different context. So what we are talking about is so many, component level standards prevail. So many application level standards prevail. People might say that we already have standards. Yes, you have standards. The home building standards are there. So are standards in the health domain. The transportation sector has got a lot of standards. So all these, even the medical applications, they have a lot of standards. Those standards we are not going to do away with. They will remain where they are. Only thing is that those standards and the communication standard, which is now stitching all these IoT applications together, will work in tandem. And that is what we call interworking of these different domains with a common standard that is called 1M2M. So the horizontal cross-domain interoperability is achieved only through this kind of a standardization, which is a standardized common service layer standardization, where different M2M devices. So I'll move fast. Now, one example you will see of these kind of data sharing of different divergent applications that is there for show in our stall. Outside, you will see 3 divergent applications. One is a traffic streetlight application, and which is developed by CDAC on our platform. We have our platform, which is a smart living platform. We control the ACs in this particular building. We also have a fire application. So whenever there is a fire event happening, that fire event causes all the air conditioners to stop, because that is what you need when the building catches fire. And at the same time, the traffic lights will be in the blink mode so that you watch and go. So creating a traffic. So 3 divergent applications sharing our data because of just one event. That is there for show on our platform outside. Have a look at that. So what was M2M? In simple terms, the main goal was to develop a technical specifications for M2M service layer. You will hear more from Dale Seed, who is going to present later in this day. So these are the 14 common service functions which Roland just spoke about in detail. You will hear about them in further details. I'm not going to talk about it now. Implementation, this is an important slide. People many a times mistake open source for standards. Open source are the implementations. They can be for standards. They can be for non-standard proprietary implementations also. So while 1M2M has got 2 types of implementations, there are quite a few on the open source domain. There are quite a few on the commercial domain, and C.Dot is one of them. So this slide shows how it also allows for multiple operators providing the standards-based solutions to coexist together. So you have 2 service providers, M2M service providers, having the 1M2M compliant platform providing services to maybe the similar geographies, and they can share data amongst themselves. The specifications support that as well. Now, these are the different stages, different releases. Release 1 started and focused only on the common service functions. Now we are working on release 4. And now you see what we are talking about: fog edge computing, 3GPP interworking, vehicular-centric features, semantic reasoning and ontology mapping, and all that stuff. So it's very mature. The intent of showing this slide was that this is a reasonably matured standard, matured set of specifications, which is now taking shape in the form of implementations across the globe in a very breakneck speed. So how deployment in India would happen? Many people, since there are people from the government agencies available over here. So the question is to how this implementation would happen from the process point of view. DOT, some time back had brought out a document where M2M service provider was supposed to, register themselves. So they, So by having an ecosystem where these M2M service providers and M2M application service provider, they engage into an agreement with each other, this can be rolled out. So the benefits are for you to see: majorly interoperability for authenticated devices and applications, and data sharing. And if this is not done, then we will lose interoperability. There will not be any kind of interoperability. We lose on security. We lose benefits of local entrepreneurs to participate in this particular endeavor. The regulations, implementation of KYC norms would be extremely difficult. Monetization of the M2M service provider, it's very important. Application service provider would not be structured. Monetization might happen, but it will not be structured and clear. And licensing, which is now a low-touch licensing, would become a no-touch licensing. And transparency, obtaining details and statistics about our devices. Today, if suppose Delhi wants to know that how many vehicles are plying as on date, as this point in time in Delhi, it's extremely difficult, or rather I must say impossible. So there I close my talk. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for making us delve into the myriad aspects which make one M2M essential for India. Our next speaker in this session is Mr. Sushil Kumar, who is currently working as Deputy Director General in Telecommunication Engineering Center, TEC, and heading the Internet of Things Division. An officer of the 1987 batch of Indian Telecommunications Service, he joined Department of Telecommunications after obtaining Bachelor's in Electronics and Communications Engineering and Master's in Computer Science and Technology from the erstwhile University of Roorkee, presently known as IIT Roorkee. In his current role, he created framework for finalizing specifications in M2M IoT with multi-stakeholders participation and released 12 technical reports in the last 4 years. The recommendations from these reports are being used in policy standards for the development of ecosystem. Sir, may I request you to deliver your talk on IoT M2M standardization work carried out in TEC.
Good afternoon. I am between you and the lunch, so I will take the minimum time of 8 to 10 minutes. This IoT is one of the most disruptive technology being discussed across the globe, and it is benefited by a number of technologies. It is a bunch of technologies. It is benefited by artificial intelligence, machine-to-machine communication, and machine learning, deep learning, 5G, blockchain, etc. I am from Telecommunication Engineering Center, that is the technical wing of Department of Telecom, and DOT is the nodal point for having coordination with the ITU, and this TEC participates in ITU-T meetings. It's not working. ITU-T meetings. TEC is also the reference point for the WTO TBT हैंग हो गया तुम्हारा पीसी. TEC also designated national inquiry point for WTO TBT for telecom sector. It is having MRA with the Singapore, and TEC has also been entrusted for the work of MTCTE, that is the mandatory testing and certification of telecom equipment. Let us come to the IoT. I will start with the ITU definition, that is that says it is a global infrastructure for the information society enabling advanced services by implementing the interconnecting physical and virtual things based on existing and evolving interoperable information and communication technology. Interoperability is very, very important. ITU-T created a study group 20 in some time 2015, and in the same year we created National Working Group 20 to submit contribution in ITU-T SG20 and to have coordination there. This is the slide having showing projections. Projections may vary from agency to agency, and global projections are from 24 billion to 50 billion. But in India, if we see, there is a target assigned by Department of Telecom to create an ecosystem for 5 billion connected devices by 2022. That is very important for us. And as we will be having the 100 smart cities to come up, and MORTH has already issued the mandate for the vehicle tracking devices for commercial passenger vehicles to be connected. Then we can have not 5 billion, we can have 4 billion connected devices by 2022, but we have to create the ecosystem for that. This is the picture I have taken from the MOHUA this website. In India, we are developing many verticals at the same time. Like in other countries, people are developing sometime intelligent transport system, sometime the city surveillance. But in India, we are developing city surveillance, intelligent transport system, water management, waste management, traffic management, smart street lighting. At least 4 to 5 verticals are being developed simultaneously. And for this, we need a horizontal service layer to connect all these verticals. This is a slide taken from the ITU document, and it shows, it is very important, it shows that the smart city platform, that is the horizontal layer, that is the brain of the city. And brain is very important, whether it is the human being, and now it will be for the smart city. But the challenge is the interoperability, scalability, dynamicity, security, and the privacy, and all other items have been kept below the brain of the city. Now, I've gone through some of the policy document of the IMDA Singapore and also the documents of the Europe, and I found that the platform has been mentioned as one of the most important items for the development of the IoT ecosystem as well as for the smart cities, and it should be based on standards enabling interoperability, scalability, and the modularity. That has been mentioned in Singapore policy document as well as in the Europe documents. Intelligence, support of AI and machine learning, analytics, security, low power wireless communication network, and high speed reliable internet at fixed and mobile devices. This is for the development of ecosystem and in turn for the smart cities. This is the slide challenges which have been mentioned in the ITU document, and if we see at the number 3, the interoperability and open interfaces enabling platform to talk to each other, that has been mentioned as a big challenge in the ITU document. It shows that we have to for sharing of data across between the verticals and across the platforms, we have to have the interoperability. We are participating in the ITU meetings, and we are also participating in 3GPP, 1M2M, ETSI, GSMA, and IEEE meetings whenever we get the chance. But most of the time we participate in ITU meetings. In India, we are collaborating with BIS and TSDSI. This slide I will skip, already covered in ITU presentation by Dr. Shane. This ITUT Study Group 20, U4 SSC, ITUT Focus Group on Data Processing and Management, and IoT for Sustainable Development Goals. These are very important activities going on in the ITU. Then 1M, 2M related things have already been discussed by the TP chair, and we can skip these 3 slides. But horizontal service layer, that is very, very important for the platform. This we can skip this. We started working in M2M and IoT domain sometime in 2014, and I am really thankful to all the senior DDGs of Mr. Mittal and Mr. Singhal, who encouraged us to work, and Mr. Day also, who encouraged us to work in this domain. We formed multi-stakeholder working groups, and we released this 13 technical reports, 12 technical reports released by my division and 1 from my other division. This 5 technical reports, they are in the verticals, released in 2015. And you see M2M Gateway and Architecture. This document was released in 2015, and in this document, the work group members discussed and mentioned the 1M, 2M standard even in 2015. So it shows the importance of the horizontal service layer and the standard. Now this spectrum requirement for PLC and low power RF communication, and other 2 documents which were released in 2018 were the design and planning smart cities with IoT ICT and the recommendation for IoT and M2M security. These documents are available in the TEC website. These are some of the actionable items which emerged from these technical reports and became the parts of the policy document and the standards in various standardization organization. This 13-digit numbering scheme, it has already been approved by DOT, and now it is being implemented in the TSP networks for SIM-based devices and gateways, which will coexist with the 10-digit numbering scheme of the smartphones. Embedded SIM and the remote subscription management, it has already been approved for use in TS Telecom Service Provider Network. Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has already mandated it as a standard for the vehicle tracking devices to be used in commercial passenger vehicles, and this mandate came after the government of India assigned this task after this Nirbhaya Kand. And BIS has also included embedded SIM in the standard for vehicle location tracking device. So this embedded SIM is a very, very important item for this. This gateway device and gateway to have the IPv6, BIS has already mandated for this for smart meters to be connected on cellular technologies. Another large number of this points emerge from these documents, and one of them is common service layer requirement at the platform, important for data sharing, security, and interoperability. And all these, some of these points came sometime in 2015 itself. We participated in a large number of meetings in the ITU, in either remotely or in person. We submitted contributions, and one of our document, which is having 5 use cases submitted from TEC India and 1 use case from Egypt, that has reached an agreement in the ITUT SG20 meeting in China in December 2018. And it has already been published on the ITU website, and this use case mentioned at serial number 2, that is the digitization and automation of vehicle tracking, safety, conformance, registration and transfer via the application of eSIM and digital identity, if it is implemented in the Indian ecosystem, will resolve a large number of complexities and issues of the automotive sector. This one technical report, this is M2M enablement in remote health management. It was submitted by the e-health advisor in the ITUT meeting in 2015. And this document has also been presented recently by the medical fraternity in the WHO in June 2019. This MTCT is already in progress in TEC. So what we are doing at present, these 4 work items are in progress in TEC, that is the finalization of IoT ICT standards for smart cities, adoption of 1M2M standards transposed by TSDSI, establishing the IoT Experience Center in TEC, and framework for security by design principles and National Trust Center for IoT. In this adoption process, TSDSI transposed 17 TS and 10 TR of release to 1M2M, 1M2M release to, and submitted to DOT. DOT in turn has sent to TEC. TEC framed a process, and in this process, it is a 2-layered committee. One is the consultative committee, and one is the apex committee, that is the TSEC. The consultative committee is having the members from the industry and the government, and we are working on this. We have arranged a large number of meetings of this, and in fact, for the capacity building, we arranged 2 webinars and 2 training programs of 1 day each, having experts from India and abroad. Some issues related to interworking with the 1M2M were raised, but these have been resolved because the people were not having enough knowledge of the 1M2M, and these capacity building programs have helped a lot. Now, 1M2M standards, this talks about its interworking with OCF, OPC, UA, and other standards. It is really wonderful. 1M2M interworking with NGSILD is an important item, because NGSILD standard has been created by HC, and it is for the data layer. This are taken from the ITU document, and it has shown how the CIM context information management is important for the data layer, and how it will work with the 1M2M specifications. So recently I was discussing with the TP chair, and I have taken some of the information and added my knowledge. Yesterday these points came to my, I need a query to this, and some sort of clarification. Whether 1M2M and NGSILD are the competing standards, or they will work together in collaboration for interwork. As on date, these are not the competing standards, but this answer is to be found out. Any work in progress in ITU on NGSILD, and any work item in 1M2M to include the functionality of NGSILD, because both these standards are very, very important, and both have to collaborate with one another for the benefit of the IoT ecosystem and for the smart city. These 3 standards which have been released by ITU for the interoperability of smart city platforms, these are generic standards, and in my opinion, these can be made mandatory standards for the country. These 17 documents which have been adopted by ITU, and these are 1M2M release 2 documents, and once they have been adopted by ITU, and they are under discussion in TEC, and what I feel, these should be adopted in the country also. These are some of the standards which we have included in our report, which we are preparing for the smart city for MOHUA. Large number of standards in the form of technical document have been released by the ITU. They are really very good standards. We should study these standards. These are freely available on the Google. You can type the number and the content, the PDF will come. And these are related with the vertical power, automotive, water management, health, and gateway, setting the framework for ICT infrastructure, Y supplement 27. It is a wonderful document. Then IoT use case document, Y supplement 53, data layer platform, sensor devices. These are some of the important documents which I have mentioned, but large number of documents, and they have been released as a standard by the ITU TSG20. In the last, I can say the open standards and interoperability, they are the key to resilience, sustainable, and scalable smart growth, smart city growth. And I hope we should be able to adopt the global interoperability standards for the development of the ecosystem in IoT domain and for the smart cities in India. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing with us the details on IoT M2M standardization initiatives undertaken by TEC. Now, I would like to hand over the stage to the session's chair for the concluding remarks and the questionnaire.
So in a minute, if someone would like to ask a question, that is still possible, and you can ask it to a specific speaker. Let me just, while you are reflecting on a question to pose, in this very rich session, make a few observations from my side. First of all, I'm very impressed, and as a matter of fact, there's a lot of information here, but I like the detailed slides most. Why? Because I think it really shows how much work has been done, how many issues have been resolved, and also, in a certain sense, that's the maturity of the field, how many issues are still to be resolved. People are still working on that, which is actually a good sign, because that shows that really since in these 7 years of one M2M, and actually a longer period, there has been many developments, and there has been also a lot of application from which there was learning. At the same time, also the, for example, more detailed slides show there are many of these developments happening, many people working on standards, and there is a need for collaboration. So there is also definitely a next stage that seems to be coming. You make a very convincing case for what has been done so far, but I think also a very convincing case for continuing in the future on collaboration in particular and in resolving these various issues. I think at the next event, then it would also be terribly interesting to hear, so how does this now work out in the market? How does this work out now in delivering economic and public value? And how does this work out in delivering a global infrastructure? And then to put that to the test. And a little bit as a joke, perhaps, you were mentioning that on the agenda now is also AI. Perhaps we need indeed a bit of AI to navigate the space of IoT from time to time, even for ourselves. So is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Yes, please. Yeah. Is there a microphone? Yes. It's about one M2M, yeah.
Yeah, I would just like to know that what is the present status of adoption of one M2M in EU, the Europe, and its implementation on the ground.
Okay. Perhaps that's a question for Roland?
Yeah, thank you for the question. If you get my slide set, you even find this link on the web page. You find a list of implementations, pilots, prototypes of 1M2M that are publicly available, or at least publicly linked to, and it's about 64 of such implementations and pilots, including CDOT, including others. And what in this respect might also be of interest is there's also a certification page available where you see currently it's more or less focused on South Korean companies, since until end of last year or beginning of this year, the South Korean Standardization Organization was responsible for the certification as such, so and focused on the South Korean market. And here you find different companies with their products that they undergo the certification testing. So it's also a sign of maturity, so that they needed to do the certification for their smart city implementations in South Korea.
Thank you. Let's see, are there other questions here from the room, or perhaps also from Bangalore? May I? Over there, yes. You've got a microphone.
Hello, good afternoon. Myself Kapil from Vyom Digital Services. Actually, I want to know the Horizon 2020 program covered by the EU, and because we are working in the health sector, and it's a digital health in villages and metro cities, we have launched is the next ROLA for health. So we are looking the Horizon 2020 initiative in the programs for startups, because as a startup we are facing too much problem to communicate with EU and Horizon 2020 program. Yeah. I want to listen on this track.
It's very good probably to raise that point, and also to bring that point, perhaps there are representatives of the EU delegation also present here who can take that up, because that is indeed very important to keep these kind of programs open. I think we all have the experience here around the table that governmental R&D programs do need a degree of bureaucracy, but they should also still be very accessible, certainly now that these technologies are developing so fast and you're doing cross-sector work, and health is a very good example of that. Let me answer that.
Thank you.
Would you like to say something, Pamela?
I don't know. Is there anybody who knows about Horizon 2020? Anybody else?
Well, I don't know if our representatives from, well, Etsy, of course, is involved in that, but perhaps you don't want to comment on that directly. But it must be said that perhaps just to add to that, so Horizon 2020 is being revised, of course. There's now a Horizon Europe coming. And from my work, also former work in the European Commission, I know that they are certainly quite concerned about getting things moving faster, and also making sure that the international collaboration functions very well in that. It's really strategic. So I think you got a very important point there. Let me perhaps also, in view of time, wrap up and finish this. Pamela, yeah, please.
So what I would say is, I mean, we don't have a ready answer to your requirement, but if you can come and interact with us in TSDSI and bring your request, we will try to help you out.
Well, with that, from my side as panel chair, I would like to thank all of the speakers for having contributed here and having foreseen for us such a very rich contribution. And perhaps our masters of ceremony want to provide us with the closing remarks also in respect of lunch. So Pamela Kumar, Roland Hegwartner, Shane He, Arindam Bhattacharya, and Sushil Kumar, many thanks to you, and I would say a hand of applause for them.
Thank you, sir. We once again thank our eminent speakers for making us delve into the nuances of the dynamically changing communication scenario. Let me now request Mr. Vipin Tyagi, Executive Director CDOT, to formally present a token of thanks and gratitude to all our panel members. Professor Paul Timmers, University of Rijeka and Oxford. Ms. Pamela Kumar, Director General, Telecommunications, Standards Development Society India, TSDSI. Mr. Roland Hegwartner, Chairman 1M2M Technical Plenary. Mr. Arindam Bhattacharya, Group Leader, Center for Development of Telematics. Mr. Sushil Kumar, Deputy Director General, Telecommunication Engineering Center, TEC. We would also like to thank Dr. Shane He for remotely connecting with us in this session. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now proceed for lunch at the designated areas. I request you all to reassemble here for the next session after 40 minutes. I would also like to remind you about the exhibition that has been staged outside the auditorium and can be visited during the breaks.
In India and outside. At present, Li-Fi is in the process of being turned into an ultra-fast consumer home network product with coexistence with Wi-Fi and a related standard, IEEE 802.11, which also I think we'll hear tomorrow, is already set for release in 2021. So far, this sort of technology has largely only been used in indoor, but now we are seeing quite a lot of outdoor use cases. We are very excited to listen to Professor Haas today. I request Professor Haas to present his lecture on future of wireless communication and work he is doing in the field of visible light communication and Li-Fi. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Haas.